The Knicks just won their first championship since 1973. And the way that they did it is a lesson in resilience that every business owner absolutely needs to hear. Now, a while back, I did an episode on resilience. It came out of a message I had heard from a pastor in Florida, and the idea stuck with me that resilience is really not about avoiding the hard moments, right? It's about how you respond when the hard moments find you. Well, I've been watching something play out this season that brought the whole idea back to life for me, and I want to talk to you guys about it today, and I'm talking about the New York Knicks. Now, I want to say something right up front. Yes, I am going to tie this back to physical therapy businesses because there's a lot in here to unravel that I think you will absolutely be able to use. But I also want you to know what the Knicks just did as a sports fan, okay? And I know a lot of you are sports fans, but it was one of the most incredible things I've watched in sports in a long time. And a lot of you watching today, I know you just love sports, right? And I think this is worth studying and kind of unpacking. So let's do it. Let's talk about the Knicks and what they did, and let's talk about how you can use this in your business. You know, the accomplishment itself really was the point, okay? The Knicks just won 2026 NBA championship. And as I said, it was the first championship since 1973. Think about that, right? 53 years. There are grown adults with grandchildren who were not even alive the last time this franchise won it all. And as a Philadelphia fan, I cannot tell you that I've not enjoyed watching the Knicks not win the NBA championship for a lot of those years. But I'll tell you, down the stretch of this, I became a Knicks fan, absolutely for sure. Now, did the Knicks take the easy road? No, they did not. All right. In the finals, they ended up beating the San Antonio Spurs, as you all know, 4-1. But in every single one of those wins, they came back from double-digit deficits. Game four. You look at that at halftime. I'm telling you, I guarantee most of you went to bed, all right? They were down 29 points, ended up winning 107-106. That is the largest comeback in the history of the NBA playoffs. And as you know, their leader, Jalen Brunson, he put in 45 that night and ended up being the finals most valuable player, and boy, did he deserve it. But let's go back another round, okay? In the very first round of the playoffs, they fell behind 2-1, and you heard a lot of talk. The Knicks are going to fall on their faces again. They reeled off 13 wins in a row. That is the second longest playoff winning streak the NBA has ever seen. Imagine that. So this is not just a lucky run, okay? This was a team that kept getting knocked down, got up over and over and over, and they took it all the way to the top. So here's kind of the part that really gets to the heart of, again, what I mentioned in the beginning, which is resilience. And that is why I keep coming back to that message from Journey Church. For the Knicks, this didn't just start this year, right? 1 year ago, in 2025, this same core group had a really good season. They just ended up losing to the Boston Celtics, but they reached the conference final, and that was the first time they had done that in 25 years. But they lost. Nobody really remembers that because they lost. We only remember the big wins, the championships, right? But I think for the Knicks, that loss in 2025, it could have broken that team. Instead, the organization, it always comes back to the organization and the people that drive these organizations. And they looked very hard at themselves, and they made some really difficult decisions. And now they come back the next year, right, and finish the job. And that's resilience. not pretending that the loss never happened, but going into the offseason, learning from it, coming back better. And I think every business owner watching has had a year that just didn't go the way you wanted it to. And so the question is, never whether that happens. The question is, what do you do in the next year? All right, let's talk about their players. This is some exciting stuff because, I think this is where it connects directly to how we run our businesses. You can't win in the NBA with one star. Okay, so, and some have tried it with 2 stars. And they've had some success, but the Knicks, look, they have a star in Jalen Brunson. He's magnificent. Now, little rattled him during the series, and he finally got rattled when? In his post-game speech, right after the game, or I should say lack of speech. But that's going to be a moment that we all remember. It's like, you go to the wedding that's perfect. Nobody remembers those. You remember when things happen, and certainly nothing tragic. They built this team, okay, around Jalen Brunson, yes, but they also had Karl Anthony Towns, right? He was a center that they traded for, and a player that a lot of people out there in basketball land, they thought he was a little too soft to anchor a real contender. He proved them wrong. Okay, he was tough down the stretch. Also had McCall Bridges, Josh Hart, and as many of you may know, Brunson, Bridges, and Hart all won a national championship, and then many years back, and now have won an NBA championship. They're the first group of teammates to win both a national championship in college and an NBA championship. So, what stood out to me was not just, hey, these were good players. It was they all seemed to raise their level when the pressure was at its highest point. Not just anybody. You can't say anybody can perform, but a lot of players can perform when the game's comfortable, when their lead is safe. Not these guys. These guys perform when they were 29 down at halftime and in the finals. And that is a completely different thing because you're under serious pressure. So here's what I want to take from that. You do not actually know what your people are made of until they're tested under pressure. You find out who rises and who fades in the difficult moments, not the easy moments. And this is really why we have to test our own staff under pressure, kind of on purpose, before the moment really shows up on its own. And, what I mean by this is, let's just say you were to go on a 3-month vacation starting tomorrow. Who on your team is going to handle the angry patient? And maybe that's why the patient was angry, because they're hangry. I'm just kidding. But who's going to handle that angry patient, or, the gap in staffing, or the payer denial, or the day that a couple therapists all call out sick? If you do not know the answer, it's because you've never really tested your team. The Knicks knew exactly who they could count on in the fourth quarter when they were down, because they had done it hundreds and hundreds of times. And they've done it in really tight situations. So your team needs the same thing. Give your people real responsibility while you're still there to coach them through it. Let them handle that really difficult call and then come into your office and walk through it. Let them run the whole morning without you there. That's how you find out what you have, and that is how you can allow them to grow into it. Now, I did some real digging into how this Knicks organization kind of set itself up, because preparation is the kind of unglamorous part that nobody really talks about, and it's where I really think the real lessons are there for us. First, they were willing to make a change when things kind of looked good. With their former coach, he was a good coach. He took them down one of the best stretches in decades. But the organization still made that hard decision because they wanted more. So they hired Mike Brown. He had been a 2-time coach of the year and had worked alongside 4 championship teams. They wanted, kind of in their words, this is directly from general manager, a collaborator, someone willing to experiment and bring a very different voice to the table. Think about how hard that is when you got somebody good, but I love this. Good is what? It's the enemy of great. And so they just were not satisfied with good. And so they made a very uncomfortable change to chase something better than good. And they obviously came down the stretch and did it. Now, they invested heavily in kind of putting the right pieces around their best player. They didn't want to have that roster that if 1 or 2 players are out, everything would fall apart. And I think somebody alerted me to an article this morning on how they stopped Wembanyama. Now, not stopped him on offense, how they stopped him on defense, okay? And as you all know, he is better known. He's 7'4" as the alien. I think he is an unbelievable athlete. But they stopped him by spreading the court out on offensive possessions and putting 5 players on the court, all who could make those threes. They weren't 5 players all who were great at making the threes. They were good at making the threes, so they could pass it to anybody who was in that 3-point range and took those shots, and they spread it out, and they made many more threes than San Antonio. And I think, that was one of the big difference makers in this court. That was real strategy coming into action. Bringing back players, all right, and this is another strategy they used. They brought back players who had won together before, and that wasn't an accident that they did that. There was real value and chemistry of taking those Villanova players and building your team somewhat around those players. Were all those players great? No, but they were all really good. And certainly Jalen Brunson has proved to be great. They also prepared for the specific moments, not just for the team. This is a team that clearly practiced for the close games, for the comeback, for that final 5 to 10 minutes. I could just picture them in their facility with the loud noise going, practicing those last 5 to 10 minutes. And they won every 5 to 10 minutes in that championship run. Those four wins they had against San Antonio, they won the last 5 to 10 minutes in all of those wins. Okay. And that is because they were pressure tested. You can do the same. You don't have to rehearse for these moments, but practice that difficult patient conversation. Role play with them. Practice the front desk handling a packed, chaotic morning and how they will show up and get through that. Because when the real version ends up showing up, your team has already been there. So yes, look, there's a clear tie to our businesses here, okay? Main things: test your people before the pressure tests them. Build depth so you are not one injury away from falling apart, right? Be willing to change when good is not good enough. And prepare for those specific, hard, and difficult moments, not just the easy ones. What I also want you to appreciate about this is, a franchise that had not won in 53 years and a team that lost in heartbreaking fashion the year before, they came back and made the necessary changes that needed to be changed, and it took them to the promised land. As we've said, resilience is not avoiding the fall or the bad time. It's what you do after that. The Knicks gave us about as good a lesson as we could have learned in coming back, going through the difficult times, and becoming world champions. So if any of you have any thoughts or feedback or questions about what we just talked about today or in any of my previous podcast videos, just click below. Let's talk. Thank you and have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.